Imagine for a second that you are looking at the foundational code of the universe. Like, usually when we talk about things like the speed of light or, the force of gravity or even the golden ratio, there's this underlying assumption in science that these are just, well, random facts.
Right. They're just kind of accepted.
Exactly. Like you measure the speed of light in a vacuum, and it is what it is. And the physicist just points at the number on the chalkboard and says, there it is. That's the universal speed limit. Don't ask why. Just, use the number.
Yeah, in classical and even quantum physics, these are treated as brute facts of nature. I mean, they are empirical constants.
Right.
You observe them, you measure them with incredibly precise instruments, you plug them into your formulas, but you don't necessarily deduce them from a blank piece of paper. They're just the given boundaries of our reality.
And it's comforting in a way. I mean, we like things to be observable. We like our reality to be categorized as, just the way things are. It requires less existential heavy lifting for you and me.
Oh, definitely. It's safer.
But then you step into the world of theoretical physics crossed with ancient metaphysics, and suddenly that chalkboard full of random constants it's totally erased. We are looking at a conceptual landscape today that is honestly completely mind-bending.
Yeah.
Because what if those fundamental constants of the universe aren't random numbers we just happen to measure?
Right. What if they're not accidents?
Yeah. What if they are the literal mathematical thoughts of a conscious creator?
Well, if that premise is true, it is the absolute definition of a paradigm shift. I mean, we would be moving from a universe composed of dead, accidental matter that somehow stumbled into a functioning order to a universe of living mathematical purpose.
Wow.
A reality where the numbers aren't just descriptions of the furniture, The numbers are the engine of creation itself.
That is just exactly. And that brings us to an absolutely staggering document we have in front of us today for this deep dive. It's written by George James Dukas, and it is titled Alpha and Omega, the Mathematical Proof of God.
It's quite a title.
It really is. And just to add to the weight of it, the text incorporates something called the Trans-Dimensional Unified Field Theory V3. Now, just a quick heads up to you listening right now. This text goes incredibly deep into theology, advanced physics, and pure philosophy.
Very deep.
And our goal here isn't to take a side or, endorse a specific religion or tell you what you should believe about the universe. We're simply here to impartially unpack the fascinating, really radical ideas contained in this source material and figure out how the author connects these massive concepts.
And the mission for this deep dive is honestly incredibly ambitious. We are going to explore a framework that actively attempts to overturn 400 years of scientific materialism.
400 years, that's no small task.
Not at all. We're going to break down how this text uses pure mathematics and pure geometry to argue that consciousness is the absolute ontological foundation of reality. We'll look at why it claims physical constants, like that speed of light you mentioned earlier, are geometrically necessary, not random. And ultimately, we are going to translate what this intensely mathematical view of God actually means for your everyday physical human existence.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because regardless of your personal theology or whether you have a PhD in quantum mechanics or, whether you haven't taken a math class since high school, this text demands a complete reevaluation of how you view the physical space around you. It blends physics, geometry, and ancient metaphysics into one unified equation.
It really weaves them all together.
So where do we even begin to dismantle 4 centuries of established science? Like, what's step 1?
Well, to understand the architecture of this text, you first have to understand the specific foundation it is trying to demolish. The author starts with a direct assault on materialism.
Materialism.
Yeah. Materialism is the dominant scientific paradigm of the modern era. It is the fundamental assumption that matter is primary. It assumes the universe started as dead stuff, particles, fields, forces, just floating in a vacuum.
Just rocks and gas pumping into each other.
Exactly. And the standard narrative is that over billions of years, this dead stuff randomly bumped together, formed stars, forged heavier elements, and eventually arranged itself into complex biological machines like human brains.
Right. The idea that your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, all of it is basically just the exhaust fumes of your neurons firing.
Right.
Like biology gets complex enough and consciousness just sort of oozes out as a byproduct of the machinery.
Precisely. It's called emergent materialism. But the central thesis of Dukas's work is the exact polar opposite.
Okay.
The text argues unequivocally that materialism is not just incomplete, it is fundamentally logically flawed. It posits that consciousness precedes matter.
So the mind came first.
Right. Consciousness isn't the product of the universe is the product of consciousness. And the source argues that materialism is currently collapsing under the weight of 4 insurmountable problems.
Okay, I love a good structural takedown. Let's dig into these 4 problems, because I think setting the stage is, well, it's crucial for everything that follows.
Yeah.
What is the first major roadblock the text points out for materialism?
The first is widely known in philosophy as the hard problem of consciousness. The text highlights that even if you completely map physical matter, like if you trace every single neuron in a brain, track every electrical impulse, map every chemical
You
exchange.
still don't know what's actually happening in the mind.
Exactly. None of that physical objective data explains subjective experience.
So it's the gap between the wiring and the feeling. Like, I can know exactly which part of my brain lights up when I eat a strawberry, but that wiring diagram doesn't explain why it actually feels sweet to me or why seeing the color red feels like redness.
Yes, that's exactly it. Materialism hits an absolute brick wall there. And what's fascinating here is how the text views this wall. It doesn't see it as a temporary gap in our scientific knowledge that we'll just figure out in 50 years.
Oh, interesting. So it's not a we'll get there eventually kind of thing.
No, it views it as a fatal structural flaw in the materialist premise itself. If you start with the assumption that matter is primary and completely devoid of inner experience, the leap to subjective experience is mathematically and logically impossible.
You can't get blood from a stone.
Exactly. You cannot get something from nothing. You cannot get the subjective I from a pile of objective its.
That makes total sense. I mean, if the foundation is dead, you can't just build a tall enough tower of dead things until it suddenly wakes up and says hello.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the second problem?
The second is the fine-tuning problem. This deals with the physical constants of the universe we were just talking about. The strength of gravity, the expansion rate of the cosmos, the mass of an electron.
The numbers on the chalkboard.
Right. The text emphasizes that these numbers are so perfectly calibrated for complex life to exist that it defies statistical logic.
Really? Like, how finely tuned are we talking?
Incredibly fine. If the strong nuclear force were off by a fraction of a percent, stars wouldn't be able to forge carbon. No carbon, no biology. If gravity were slightly stronger, the universe collapses immediately. Slightly weaker, stars never form.
And the standard materialist defense to this is usually the multiverse, right? Like, they say, well, the math is incredibly improbable for this one universe, so there must be an infinite number of random universes bubbling out there, and we just happen to live in the lucky one that supports life.
Yes, the argument, yeah.
It's like buying an infinite number of lottery tickets so you are mathematically guaranteed to win one day.
Which, as the source astutely points out, is a massive, desperate, speculative leap. You are inventing infinite, completely unobservable, untestable universes just to explain the precision of the one universe we actually can observe.
It does feel like a bit of a cop-out when you put it like that.
The text argues this is a philosophical attempt to save materialism from the sheer mathematical improbability of our existence. It's avoiding the simpler conclusion the universe is tuned because it has a tuner.
Okay, problem number 3. Now, this one always breaks my brain a little bit. The problem of mathematical truth.
Yes, why does math describe reality so perfectly? The physicist Eugene Wigner famously called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics.
I've heard that phrase before.
Right. If math is just a human invention, a cognitive tool we evolved on the plains of Africa, why does an equation cooked up purely in the abstract mind of a mathematician perfectly predict the behavior of a black hole billions of light years away?
Okay, this is exactly where I want to push back, though. Let me play devil's advocate for you listening. Isn't math just a descriptive language?
How do you mean?
Well, we invented numbers to count sheep, to build bridges, to measure land boundaries. We created a language of logic. And just because a language is really good at describing things, it doesn't mean the language is the universe, right? Like, if I describe an apple really well in English, it doesn't mean the apple is literally made of English.
That is the standard pragmatic view of mathematics, yes. It's an instrumentalist view. But the text aggressively counters that exact analogy.
Oh, really? How so?
Ducas's logic argues that mathematics doesn't just describe reality, it is reality. If math were just a descriptive tool like English, it wouldn't have predictive power over phenomena we haven't even discovered yet.
Wait, predictive power?
Yes. We wouldn't be able to write an equation and say, according to this math, a specific subatomic particle must exist, and then build a particle collider 30 years later and find it exactly where the math said it would be.
Ah, I see. Yeah, English doesn't predict the existence of new types of fruit just because I wrote a poem about one.
Precisely. The text argues that the reason math works isn't because we invented a clever tool. It's because our minds, our consciousness, are participating in the exact same foundational logic that generated the cosmos. We are uncovering the pre-existing source code.
That is wild.
And that ties perfectly into the fourth and final problem materialism faces, the problem of universal constants.
How does the text define that one?
It asks a deceptively simple question. Why does everyone measure the exact same speed of light?
Because it's the speed limit.
Right, but if consciousness is just a local, isolated illusion emerging from individual meat computers in our skulls.
Gross, but okay.
If your brain is just rendering its own hallucination of reality, why do we all share the exact same objective reality with the exact same fundamental, unbreakable limits? Why is there a unified field of rules at all?
So if I'm tracking the text argument correctly here, materialism can't explain why we are conscious. It has to invent infinite invisible universes to explain why ours works. It can't explain why abstract math controls physical reality. And it can't explain why the rules are universally binding.
That sums it up.
Those are four massive structural cracks in the foundation.
They are the wrecking ball. The text uses these four problems to clear the lot. Once materialism is discarded as a failed hypothesis, the author has room to build a new framework. A framework where consciousness and mathematics are the primordial bedrock.
Okay, so let's walk onto that empty lot. If matter isn't the starting point and consciousness is the foundation, how did it actually start?
That's the big question.
Because it's one thing to philosophize and say, mind created matter. It's a completely different thing to show the math of how an abstract thought actually turns into a physical universe. How do you get from literally nothing to something?
And this is exactly where the document transitions from philosophical critique into pure, rigorous derivation. It introduces what it calls the God equation.
The God equation. Okay, I am going to read this central foundational formula exactly as it appears in the text. And I wanted to take our time breaking this down. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
The equation is oblivion multiplied by infinity multiplied by pi equals 0. I'm going to say that one more time for you listening. Oblivion times infinity times pi equals 0. Visually, it's a circle with a slash through it, an infinity symbol, the Greek letter pi, and a 0.
It sounds almost like metaphysical poetry, doesn't it?
It really does.
But the source insists this is a literal operational description. It is the mechanical equation of creation. To understand it, we have to completely strip away our everyday definitions of these symbols and learn the lexicon of the text.
All right, let's take them one by one. Start with oblivion. The symbol is a circle with a diagonal slash. Now, when I hear oblivion, I usually think of a vacuum, empty space, nothingness.
And the text is very careful to correct that exact assumption. Oblivion in this framework is emphatically not a vacuum.
Wait, it's not.
No, a vacuum in modern physics is actually a very busy place. It has dimensions, it has quantum fields, particles pop in and out of existence all the time. That is not nothing.
Okay, so what is oblivion then?
Oblivion is defined as the gate of silence. It is absolute, profound non-awareness. It is the threshold condition. Think of it as the ultimate state of unmanifest. It is the boundary condition between what absolutely cannot be and what potentially might be. It has no coordinates, it has no space.
Okay, so it's the ultimate blank slate. Not even a slate, actually, just the concept of blankness itself.
Yes.
Then we multiply that by the next variable, infinity. Now, I know what infinity means, but how does it fit in here?
Infinity here represents unbounded potential. It is the concept of all possibilities, all recursion, every geometric shape, every frequency that could ever theoretically exist.
That's a lot.
It's everything. But, and this is the crucial distinction, by itself, infinity is completely formless. It has no structure, no hierarchy, no organizer. It is a canvas that has never been painted, a library of every possible letter floating in a chaotic jumble.
So it's just noise.
Exactly. Unbounded potential without an intention is just noise.
So we have the ultimate blankness, and we have unbounded chaotic potential. Next comes the organizer, pi. Now, when most of us think of pi, we remember high school geometry, right? 3.14159. It's the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. We use it to find the area of a pizza.
Right, it's a very practical number for us.
But the text elevates pi to something astronomically higher.
It does. The source states that pi is God as the transcendent operator. It represents the primordial, pre-existent wave. In this framework, pi is not merely the number 3.14, it is geometric consciousness itself. It is the divine awareness entering the equation. It is the intentionality that can take that unbounded chaotic infinity and actually organize it into a coherent geometry.
And when you take oblivion and you multiply it by infinity, multiply that by pi, the equation says you get 0, which is wild because in normal math, if you multiply things by 0, you get 0, which means nothing.
But not here. In this text, 0 is radically redefined. 0 is origin awareness. It is the product of this cosmic collision.
Origin awareness.
Yes, it is the very first solitary declaration of I am M. It represents infinite consciousness compressed and localized to a single, infinitely dense point of awareness.
Okay, I need to wrap my head around the mechanics of this because I feel like I'm missing something fundamental.
Go ahead.
Why are these variables multiplied? Why isn't it oblivion plus infinity plus pi? In my head, I'm trying to picture this like a door. Like oblivion is a locked door, infinity is all the stuff in the room behind the door, and pi is the key that opens it. But that doesn't explain the multiplication.
That's a really good intuition, but you're right. The door analogy fails the how test. It fails to explain the mathematical interaction. Let's look at why the text specifically uses multiplication.
Okay.
If you add variables together, you are just stacking them side by side. Like an apple plus an orange sits next to each other in a bowl. It's a simple blending or a mixture. The structure remains discrete.
Right, they don't become an apple orange.
Exactly. But multiplication in advanced mathematics is a dimensional transformation. It is a catalytic operation. When a matrix acts upon a vector, it multiplies it, transforming its space.
Okay, I think I see where you're going. So it's not things sitting next to each other, it's things acting upon each other.
Precisely. Let's try a different analogy based on the geometry of the text. Imagine oblivion as a completely blank, infinite coordinate plane. There is no grid, no numbers, just abstract expanse.
Got it.
Now imagine infinity as the set of every single possible line that could ever be drawn on that plane, all existing at once. It's a chaotic blur of lines.
Just a mess.
Right. Now introduce pi. Pi is the geometric compass. It is the intention. When pi the compass acts upon infinity, the infinite lines on the backdrop of oblivion, what does it do? It forces an intersection. It organizes the lines to cross at a single absolute center. And what is that center point where everything converges?
It's the origin point, the coordinate 0, 0.
Exactly. The zero, the origin awareness. By multiplying them, by forcing them to interact and cross-reference, the unbounded chaos collapses into a single defined point of perspective. The universe wakes up at coordinates 0, 0. It is the moment the abstract mind of God establishes a localized point to begin the act of creation.
That is brilliant. That makes so much more sense now. So we have 0. The origin, the universe has officially declared, I am, I am. But I'm thinking about this logically. A single point of awareness sitting by itself in an abstract void isn't much of a universe.
Yeah.
In fact, you can't really experience reality at all because there's nothing else to look at. Like, if I am the only thing that exists and there's no light, no space, no other, I don't really have a perspective.
You've hit on the exact philosophical necessity that drives the next stage of the math. A single point has no recursion. It has no scale. It cannot witness itself.
Right.
And this leads us directly into what the document calls the mirror void and the birth of actual dimensions.
So how does 0 go from being completely alone to creating a universe that can actually interact with? The text says that this origin 0 splits into 2, 0 and negative 0.
Yes, 0 and negative 0.
Which raises an immediate mathematical and conceptual question. Why 2 zeros? I mean, in standard arithmetic, 0 is just 0. It doesn't have a positive or negative value.
It doesn't. But the document explains that 1, 0 cannot witness itself. If there is only one point of consciousness, it has no recursive loop. It can't reflect.
Okay.
By splitting into 0 and negative 0, the origin creates a mirror. You have the origin and you have its exact inverse echo. This split is the literal birth of perception.
It's the minimum viable structure required for an observer to exist. You need a viewer, and you need something to be viewed. 0 looks at negative 0, and negative 0 reflects 0. It's the ultimate cosmic echo chamber.
That is exactly the mechanism. It establishes a binary foundation, a relationship. And from this mirror, from this tension between the origin and the echo, the text says two entirely new mathematical operators emerge to build the framework of physical reality.
And we call them the golden operators phi and psi.
Right.
Okay, let's introduce these two because they seem to run the entire universe in this theory. Let's start with phi. The Greek letter phi. Now, this is a number a lot of people might recognize. It's roughly 1.618. It's known as the golden ratio.
It is.
We see it everywhere in nature. It dictates the spiral of pine cones, the curve of nautilus shells, the arms of galaxies, even the proportions of the human face.
Yes, the golden ratio is famous for its aesthetic perfection, but the text assigns it a profound mechanical role. Phi represents expansive asymmetry. Yes, it is the outward breadth of the universe. It is the principle of velocity of growth of radiation pushing outward from the origin.
And then we have its twin, its conjugate psi, the Greek letter psi. The text defines this as roughly negative 0.618.
Correct. Psi represents contractive asymmetry. If phi is the outward breath, psi is the inward breath. It is the principle of time, of containment, of gravity pulling things back together.
I love the breathing analogy. It really makes the universe feel alive. Phi breathes out, pushing reality outward into the void, and psi breathes in, holding it together so it doesn't just explode into infinite static.
Exactly.
And because they are conjugates, they're perfectly balanced. Together, they aren't just canceling each other out, they're locking together to create the structural symmetry of the entire universe.
It is incredibly elegant, and the text goes further to map these operators onto dual systems of mathematics.
How so?
It associates addition, the function of plus and minus, with structure, discrete geometry, straight lines, the bones of the universe.
Okay, so addition is the bones.
Right. And it associates multiplication, the function of scaling and crossing with waves, continuous flow, motion, the blood or life of the universe.
Bones and blood.
Yes. Phi and psi navigate these dual systems, acting as the weaving mechanism that turns pure abstract consciousness into a dimensional geometric reality.
Okay, so we have the spark of awareness at 0, we have a mirror for perception with -0, and we have the twin engines of expansion and contraction, phi and psi, acting as the bones and the blood.
We do.
But I still have a massive question. How did these abstract math concepts actually build the physical 3D space we live in? Like, I can understand a wave expanding and contracting, but how does that create the sharp edges of a crystal, or the roundness of a planet, or the literal chair I am sitting in right now?
That is the pivotal transition. We are moving from the esoteric origins of consciousness into intense derived physics. The text answers your question by introducing the central engine of creation, the Eternum Nexus.
The Eternum Nexus. Okay, the text provides an equation for this. And when I first read it, I have to admit, my eyes kind of glazed over. But we're going to break it down.
Gotcha.
The equation is the square of 1/2 of alpha times phi plus beta times psi equals pi squared. Let me say that again for you listening, kind of visualize it. Left side, in parentheses, is 1/2 times alpha phi plus beta psi. You square all that, and it perfectly equals pi squared.
It is a dense equation, but it is the cornerstone of the entire theory. Let's unpack the mechanics of this piece by piece, because we really need to define what these variables are actually doing.
Okay.
We already know phi and psi are expansive and contractive waves, but what are alpha and beta?
Yeah, what are they?
The text defines alpha and beta as structural coefficients. Think of them as vector weights. They are the mathematical parameters that govern the phase relationship between the outward wave and the inward wave. They dictate exactly how phi and psi interact.
So if phi and psi are two different sound waves, alpha and beta are like the mixing board, adjusting their volume and phase so they perfectly harmonize instead of creating terrible feedback.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. They lock the golden operators into a specific, stable geometry. Now look at the structure of the equation itself. You are taking this complex interplay of straight-line golden ratios, the left side of the equation, and you are squaring it, and it perfectly equals pi squared.
Right.
What this equation is doing is proving mathematically that the continuous wave of creation, represented by the circle, pi squared, emerges directly from discrete measurable structure, represented by the straight lines and squares on the left side.
It's mathematically squaring the circle.
Yes.
It's bridging the gap between straight lines and curves. It's showing how you can build a round universe out of straight mathematical scaffolding.
Yeah.
The author calls this the golden fourth proportion.
Precisely. The golden fourth proportion is the geometric bridge. But here's where the text introduces a detail that completely rewrites how we understand physics. This transformation, this act of taking pure, infinite mathematical waveforms and forcing them into a structured, dimensional reality, is not free.
Nothing is free. Not even for the creator of the universe, apparently.
The text reveals there is an entropy cost to this manifestation. When you transition from a pure infinite wave into the resistance of a structured dimensional reality, there is a harmonic attenuation, a loss of perfect energy.
Okay, I want to stop here because we need to explain what an entropy tax actually means in this context. Because in normal physics, entropy is just things breaking down, losing heat, moving toward chaos, like a hot cup of coffee cooling down.
Right. But in this text, the entropy cost is not random decay. It is a highly specific mathematical toll. The text calculates this cost exactly. It states that the entropy cost of creation is equal to pi squared minus 1.
Pi squared minus 1.
Yes. If you calculate that, it comes out to approximately 8.87.
8.87. So every time the universe builds a physical structure out of pure math, it pays a tax of 8.87.
Yes. And the document insists this isn't just random energy loss like exhaust escaping a car engine. The text calls this 8.87 value the harmonic signature of dimensional resonance.
Harmonic signature.
It's the literal fingerprint left behind when infinite consciousness compresses itself into a finite geometry. It is the mathematical proof of God's sustaining creation against the resistance of the void.
Okay, I have to jump in here with a massive question for you. If this eternum nexus equation is the literal fundamental law of the universe, if this golden fourth proportion and this 8.87 entropy tax are the secret blueprints to how physical reality is built, shouldn't someone have noticed this before George James Dukas?
That's a fair question.
Right. I mean, humans have been looking at the stars, doing math, and building monumental architecture for thousands of years. Did we just miss the fundamental code of reality until now?
That is a highly critical, necessary question. If a theory claims to be a universal truth, it should leave evidence in the past. And the expert evidence provided in the text addresses this directly. The source doesn't just rely on abstract math, it points us to the physical world. Specifically, it points us to the Great Pyramid of Giza.
The Great Pyramid? Wait, we are bringing ancient Egypt into quantum field theory.
We are, because the text claims that the Great Pyramid is not just a tomb. It is a monumental mathematical proof frozen in stone.
No way.
Yes. The author argues that the pyramid perfectly encodes this exact golden fourth proportion, as well as the exact values of pi and phi in its physical dimensions.
Okay, how? Break down the measurements for me.
Let's look at the geometry. If you take the perimeter of the base of the Great Pyramid and you divide it by its height, you get 2 pi, the exact circumference to radius ratio of a circle. Yes. Furthermore, if you look at the slant height of the pyramid, the distance from the base up the side to the apex in relation to the distance from the center of the base to the edge, it perfectly embodies the golden ratio phi, 1.618.
Wait, really? So the pyramid is literally built out of pi and phi?
It is, and the text goes further. The specific angle of the casing stones, the internal chamber dimensions, they continuously reference this exact intersection of the square and the circle.
Wow.
The document uses this to prove a profound point. The ancients didn't just stumble upon neat building techniques by trial and error. They intuitively, or perhaps directly through some lost knowledge, understood this foundational mathematical law of creation, the eternum nexus, and they built it in stone as a witness for future generations.
So the Great Pyramid is basically a massive limestone version of the eternum nexus equation. It's a 4,500-year-old monument to the exact math we are talking about right now. That is incredible.
It's staggering.
But okay, let's bring it from ancient Egypt back to modern astrophysics. Because this geometric foundation doesn't just build ancient pyramids. The text claims it builds the literal fabric of space-time, and it dictates the ultimate limits of reality. Which brings us to one of the most famous numbers in the world.
The speed of light.
Yes. Science tells us the speed of light in a vacuum, represented by the letter c, is roughly 299 million meters per second. Often written as 2.99 times 10 to the 8th.
Right.
It's a constant. We measure it. Einstein built relativity on it. But as we said at the beginning, standard physics just measures it. The text we are looking at today doesn't just measure it, it derives it from scratch using only geometry.
This is arguably one of the boldest, most audacious claims in the entire document. It presents an equation for the speed of light derived entirely from the golden ratio principles we just discussed, without inserting any empirical fudge factors.
Okay, let's hear it.
The equation the text provides is c equals 2 plus phi to the power of -1 plus phi to the power of -2 minus epsilon, all multiplied by 10 to the 8th power.
Okay, I'm going to need you to hold my hand through this one. Let's break that equation down piece by piece, because this completely blew my mind when I read it. Let's start with the 2. What is the 2?
The 2 represents the binary foundation of reality. The text calls it the d-squared photon plane.
The d-squared photon plane. What does that actually mean?
Imagine it as a two-dimensional geometric substrate. Before light can propagate through 3D space, it originates on a flat 2D mathematical plane of pure energy. The 2 is the mathematical baseline of that flat binary foundation.
Okay, so we start with a baseline of 2. Then the equation says we add phi to the -1 and phi to the -2.
Right. And here is where the math gets beautiful. If you take the golden ratio, phi, and you do the math on those two inverse terms, phi to the -1 plus phi to the -2, they add up perfectly, exactly, to 1.
Wait, they added to exactly 1.
Exactly 1.
Crazy.
This represents what the text calls perfect golden unity. In physics terms, the text says this represents the transverse and longitudinal waves of light perfectly coupled within every photon.
Okay, pause. Define transverse and longitudinal waves for the listener who might have forgotten high school physics.
A transverse wave oscillates side to side, perpendicular to the direction it's traveling. Think of plucking a guitar string.
Okay.
A longitudinal wave oscillates back and forth in the same direction it's traveling, through compression. Think of a sound wave pushing through the air. The text is arguing that pure light is a perfect, unified combination of both a golden unity, and mathematically, that perfect unity equals 1.
So we have the 2 from the d-squared foundation plus the 1 from the perfect golden unity waves. 2 plus 1 equals 3. A perfect trinity.
Yes. In a purely theoretical, frictionless mathematical realm, the ideal speed of light would just be a perfect, unblemished 3.
But we know from real-world measurements that the speed of light isn't a perfect 3. It's 2.9979, and that is where the next part of the equation comes in, minus epsilon.
Exactly. Epsilon represents the entropy cost. It is the localized expression of that harmonic attenuation, that 8.87 tax we discussed in the Eternum Nexus.
The friction tax.
Exactly. Think of it like a skater on perfect ice versus rough ice. A theoretical photon in a purely geometric realm travels at a perfect 3, but it has to enter our dense, dimensional physical reality.
All right.
When the pure wave descends into the resistance of physical space, it pays a slight friction tax. You subtract that tiny epsilon tax from the perfect 3, and you mathematically arrive at 2.9979.
That is stunning. And finally, the equation says we multiply all of that by 10 to the 8th. Why 10 to the 8th? What does that specific power represent?
The source explains this is the scaling factor of the 8th-dimensional spherical projection.
The 8th-dimensional spherical projection. Okay, you're going to have to translate that for me.
The text posits that reality is ultimately an 8-dimensional fractal. Our observable 3D spacetime is just a scaled-down, lower-resolution projection of that higher geometry. The 10 to the 8th is the mathematical scaling factor required to step the physics down from the 8-dimensional origin point into the 3-dimensional reality we can actually observe. It is the dimensional step-down transformer.
This is so radically different from how we are taught physics. Like, to put this in perspective for you listening right now, science usually treats the speed of light as a random speed limit we just happen to measure. Like a cop on the highway clocking cars at 65 miles per hour. You just accept the sign on the road.
Right. You don't ask why it's 65.
Exactly. But this document is saying it's a structural, geometric necessity. It's like finding out the top speed of a car isn't limited by the engine, but by the mathematical geometry of the road itself. The universe has to operate at 2.99 times 10 to the 8th because of the shape of the golden operators, the friction of the entropy tax, and the 8-dimensional scale of the projection. It removes all the arbitrariness from the universe.
It does. It binds physics to pure logic.
Yeah.
And if the speed of light is derived from pure geometry, it fundamentally changes how we understand everything else in the universe, especially the concept of mass.
Right, because Einstein taught us E equals mc squared. Energy and mass are permanently interchangeable, and they are linked by the speed of light. So if light is just geometry, how does this text redefine matter and mass? Like, what is a solid object?
The radical redefinition here is that mass is not fundamental stuff. Matter is not made of little, solid, microscopic billiard balls bouncing around in a void.
Okay, so what is it?
The text provides a new equation for mass. Mass equals d cubed times t squared. It defines mass as what happens when dimensional recursion reaches a specific geometric threshold, the third dimension.
The text calls it a permission spike. But what does that actually mean? How does a wave get permission to become a solid rock?
To understand a permission spike, think of cymatics. Have you ever seen an experiment where they put sand on a metal plate and run sound frequencies through it?
Yes. The sand bounces around randomly until they hit specific frequencies, and suddenly the sand instantly snaps into these beautiful, intricate, solid geometric patterns.
Exactly. The sand didn't change its nature. The sound wave just found a resonant harmonic that allowed a stable pattern to form. The text is saying that mass is just a localized node where the universal waves of phi and psi perfectly intersect in 3 dimensions and cancel out their motion, creating a standing wave.
Oh, wow.
It's a permission spike because the geometry of the universe finally permits volumetric persistence. Mass is just localized consciousness vibrating in a standing wave. It's an illusion of solidity created by perfect geometric resonance.
Okay, I need to take a physical breath here. We have gone on an unbelievable journey through the mechanics of reality. We started at oblivion and infinity colliding through pi to create a spark of origin consciousness. We watched the mirror void birth the golden operators phi and psi to act as the bones and blood.
We did.
We saw how the Eternum nexus squares the circle, paying an entropy tax of 8.87. We derived the exact speed of light from pure geometry, and we just explained away the solidity of matter as a cymatic standing wave.
It's a lot of math.
The mechanics of this are absolutely breathtaking, but it leaves a gaping philosophical hole.
The question of intent.
Yes.
Yeah.
If physics is just the mathematical thought of God, and we, our bodies, our brains, are just standing waves made of that physics,
Right.
what is our relationship to this creator? Like, we have spent a lot of time on the how of creation, the mechanism, the geometry. But now we must pivot to the why.
Right.
Why did God create anything to begin with? If God is infinite, if God is perfect, and if God lacks absolutely nothing, why bother making a universe full of entropy, friction, and finite, struggling creatures?
It is the ultimate theological question, and the text provides a very clear, resonant answer. Everything is about love and logos.
Love and logos, reason and connection.
God, as the infinite consciousness, the primordial pi, is fundamentally alone before creation. But the text is incredibly careful to distinguish that this aloneness is not isolation and it is not lack. The text calls it relational fullness.
Relational fullness.
Right. God doesn't create the universe because he is lonely or bored or needs a pet to worship him. Creation is not a fix for an emotional deficit.
Then what is the motive?
It is the ritual of transmission. The text argues that it is the fundamental nature of love to extend, to share reality, to propagate its own goodness. God wants to be known, but to be known requires an object. Love, by definition, requires a recipient.
But wait, I have to push back hard on this. This is where a lot of mystical frameworks lose me.
Okay, go ahead.
If God is everything, and the universe is just God's mathematical thoughts vibrating in different patterns, aren't we just God? Isn't creation just God talking to God? Isn't just an infinite consciousness playing a hyper-advanced virtual reality game with itself? Because if so, that sounds incredibly narcissistic, honestly.
That is a very common critique of pantheistic or purely monistic philosophies, where all is one and individuality is an illusion. But the text anticipates this and uses a highly specific concept to resolve it: partitioning.
Partitioning. Like how you partition a computer hard drive to run 2 different operating systems.
Conceptually, it's very similar. God doesn't just clone himself. He doesn't just make biological puppets on strings. In order to create a genuine other to love, he partitions his essence into what the text calls volitional echoes. That's us.
Oh, interesting.
How does an infinite being partition itself? By mathematically segmenting its awareness into localized nodes. God voluntarily caps the knowledge and awareness of these nodes, placing them inside the 3D geometry so that they have a distinct localized perspective.
And by limiting our perspective, we become distinct individuals.
Exactly. And most importantly, he gives these partitions true free will, the ability to choose.
Because love cannot be programmed.
Precisely. If God just created biological robots mathematically programmed to vibrate at the frequency of "I love you," it wouldn't be love. It would be a mechanical echo. It would be a mirror reflecting a light without understanding it.
Right. It's meaningless.
He gives us free will, agency, specifically so that we can be a dimensional response. We are given the absolute freedom to reject the source. Why? Because the possibility of rejection is the only thing that makes the choice of alignment meaningful. If we choose to align with the source, the love is genuine, generated by an independent volition.
I want to speak directly to you listening right now because this is where all the heavy math and quantum geometry becomes intensely, almost uncomfortably personal.
It really does.
According to this text, you aren't an accident. You aren't just a random arrangement of stardust that happened to evolve on a wet rock orbiting a minor star. You are an awakened probability. You are a partitioned piece of the divine consciousness, etched with the logos,
Yeah.
placed inside a 3D standing wave, and given free will specifically so that God can experience being freely loved back.
It's beautiful.
You are the universe's way of knowing itself, yes, but you are also God's way of experiencing a relationship with an independent choice.
It elevates human consciousness from a biological accident to a cosmic mathematical necessity. We're the geometric points where the infinite wave of God's love finally finds a reflection.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
It gives immense dignity to human existence, but it introduces a massive, dangerous variable into the math. Free will.
Yes, it does.
If we have free will and we are meant to be in harmonic alignment with this immense divine code, what happens when we choose not to align? What happens when we use that free will to go out of tune?
That brings us to the final major concept of the text's dimensional rebellion. It is the text's fascinating ontological redefinition of sin and evil.
Let's unpack this, because traditional cultural views of evil usually involve a dark force, a literal devil with horns, a cosmic battle between light and dark substances fighting over the universe.
The source entirely rejects that dualistic comic book view of the universe. In this mathematical framework, evil has no independent ontological status. It is not a thing or a substance that God created or a rival power that exists alongside God.
Then what is it? If it's not a substance, how is it so destructive?
Evil is defined purely as dimensional rebellion. It is the willful refusal of a partitioned node, a human being, to participate in the recursive harmonic structure of the universe.
Oh, wow.
If you think of the universe as a master symphony composed of the golden operators phi and psi, evil is choosing to play completely out of key. It is refusing to tune your instrument to the eternum nexus. It is isolation from the cascade of creation. Sin is not breaking an arbitrary moral rule set up by a dictator. Sin is mathematical dissonance. It breaks the geometry of your own existence.
And the text provides an actual taxonomy for this dissonance, right? The harmonic taxonomy of consciousness. It categorizes exactly how we fall out of tune. Let's guide the listener through this because it's deeply insightful regarding human psychology.
The taxonomy is split into layers of rebellion. The first baseline layer is what the text calls primary deficiency. In the author's terms, this is being dumb, but not as a pejorative insult regarding IQ. It means dormant, mute, unawakened.
Like a materialist skeptic who just genuinely doesn't see any deeper meaning in the universe.
Yes. It's a lack of awareness of one's origin. It's not necessarily malicious, it's simply a failure to resonate with the source. They are acting like dead matter because they believe they are dead matter. They aren't detecting the frequency.
But then there's a deeper, much more active and dangerous layer of rebellion.
That is the secondary layer, suppression. This is where willful, intentional interference comes in. The text calls this being stupid, again, using it as a specific terminology meaning a distorted, corrupted awareness. This is where you find what the text calls prideful pretenders and hateful interferers.
Prideful pretenders. That is a potent phrase. What does it mean mathematically?
These are beings who have some level of awareness, but they trust their finite, localized awareness far too much. They mistake a partial truth for the whole truth, and they arrogantly build their own misaligned geometries. They weaponize symbols, religions, and political systems to block the actual truth and elevate themselves. The text likens this to the classical theological fall of the angels. They didn't lose their intelligence. They arrogantly assumed their limited perspective was sufficient, rebelling against the infinite depth of God to serve their own localized ego.
So sin isn't just a moral failing, it's an ontological failure. It's choosing to shrink your reality, cutting yourself off from the blood and bones of the universe, which leads perfectly into how the text redefines the concept of authority. Because if we are rebelling, how does the universe govern us?
If you view God through the lens of a traditional monarchy as just a really powerful being sitting on a throne in the sky, you associate God with power. But the text draws a critical, defining distinction between power and authority.
Power implies force, right? Making someone do something against their will because you are bigger than them.
Exactly. Power is coercion. Power is the application of external friction to force a result. But God, in this framework, is not about power. God is authority. And authority here simply means pure, unadulterated alignment with the first cause. It is harmonic resonance. Authority doesn't need to shout or use force. It simply vibrates at the perfect, undeniable frequency of truth.
I love how we can apply this to human systems. This text makes a radical claim about how we govern ourselves politically and socially. It suggests that human concepts like checks and balances, the very foundation of our modern democracies, are actually symptoms of a profoundly broken, misaligned system.
That is the logical conclusion, because if a system is truly in harmonic alignment with the logos, you don't need external force or competing power structures to keep it in line.
Right. Like, if an orchestra is perfectly in tune with the symphony and watching the conductor, you don't need a guy with a stick walking around threatening to hit the violinist if they play a wrong note. They play the right note because it's the natural resonance of the music. It is mathematically obvious to them.
Precisely.
Checks and balances, police forces, laws backed by violence, these only exist because we assume, correctly, that people will act out of dimensional rebellion. We assume selfishness.
True governance, true authority isn't about control or dominance. It's about restoring awareness to its natural frequency. Authority is alignment. When you are aligned, you govern yourself through the logos.
It completely flips the script on how we view leadership, morality, and our place in the cosmos. It's not about following rules to avoid punishment. It's about tuning your localized standing wave to match the harmony of the universal wave.
That's beautifully put.
So as we pull all of these massive threads together, what does it actually mean to live a life in tune with this immense mathematical divine fractal?
To summarize the incredible journey we've taken today, we have traveled an immense conceptual distance. We started at the threshold of oblivion, interacting with the unbounded potential of infinity. We saw how they were organized by the transcendent intentionality of pi to produce the solitary spark of zero, the origin awareness. We watched the necessity of perception split that zero into a mirror void, birthing the golden operators phi for expansion, psi for contraction, to build the physical reality through the geometric bridge of the eternum nexus.
Right?
We saw how the speed of light itself is a derived geometric necessity, scaled down from an eighth-dimensional reality, and how matter is nothing more than a dimensional permission spike, a standing wave of consciousness.
And most importantly, we traveled all the way to understanding ourselves not as random biological dust, but as volitional echoes of divine love. We are partitioned nodes of awareness, holding the immense responsibility of free will. We can either engage in dimensional rebellion, isolating ourselves from the symphony through pride and suppression, or we can choose harmonic alignment, tuning our lives to return that love to the source.
It is a breathtaking framework. It is an attempt to unify advanced quantum physics, pure abstract mathematics, and profound spiritual purpose into a single, elegant equation. It argues that the universe is not a cold, dead machine, but a living thought.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought.
Let's hear it.
The text states something very simple but deeply profound. Everything that secretly embodies God is good. It doesn't say everything that is famous is good or everything that happens inside a religious building is good. It says everything.
Everything.
So I want to push that idea one step further for you. If mathematics, geometry, and the restoration of order are the literal thoughts and actions of God, what does that mean for your everyday, seemingly boring life? What if your mundane daily tasks aren't actually meaningless?
That's a profound way to look at it.
Think about it. What if every time you organize a chaotic, messy spreadsheet at work, or you comfort a friend whose life is falling apart and help them find center, or even if you just take 10 minutes to fix a broken squeaky hinge on a door in your house? What if you aren't just doing a chore? What if you are literally performing an act of cosmic mathematical theology? What if, in those tiny localized moments of creating order out of chaos, you are acting as an awakened node of the divine consciousness? You are actively fighting back the entropy of the universe. You are restoring the harmonic alignment of the eternum nexus right there at your desk or in your living room.
That is the ultimate empowering implication of this text. You are not a passive observer in a dead universe. You are an active participant in the ongoing geometric creation of reality.
The chalkboard isn't just full of numbers. It's full of purpose. And the chaos you see in the world around you, maybe it isn't just random decay. Maybe it's a fracture in a dimensional geometry waiting for a conscious, volitional echo waiting for you to help heal it back into perfect golden alignment. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly profound deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.